Hey guys, what's up? This is False Bulls 123, and this is day 54 of my daily quarantine vlog. So we're getting up near towards the, I think, 2 month mark by now, so yay. I'm surprised I have the stamina to actually do these many daily vlogs, but whatever. I'm still trying to upload everything, get everything sussed up, but that's not what today's vlog is about. What is today's vlog about, Ryan? Well, let me tell you. So I was, like I usually do, trolling along, watching some book tags, because I love book tags. They're zesty, they're fun, and I'm like, ooh la la. And I stumbled upon one that I think was called, Paperbacks in Paradise. I believe that's what her name is. I apologize if that's not your name. Yes, I feel bad if I get that incorrect. But she made this book tag called the stay at home book tag, and it was all these different prompts for just stuff you're doing during the quarantine. She released about a month ago, so I'm a little out of the zeitgeist for the moment. But I thought it was a lot of fun, and I thought while I'm at the quarantine, while I'm stay at home, I should be doing this shit and have fun with it. Also, not gonna lie, I didn't really have a plan for a vlog today, and I watched it yesterday. I'm thinking that looks like fun, and I'm thinking fine, let's just do it today. So I brought I thought long and hard, by which I mean took 5 minutes to brainstorm, and I came up for I came up with some books for the prompts. So first one is called The Lying in Bed. Oh good, I'm already doing that. Just kidding. Well, I'm not kidding. I'm sitting in bed, but what's a book you can read in bed in one day? So this was a little hard to choose just one book, because most of the books I have on my shelf were I've kept all of my books that I read in middle school, all the books I read in high school, and so I have a lot of middle grade and young adult fiction from the 90s, on my shelves. Not that I was born in the 90s, but you know what I mean. And it's so there's a lot of books I could read fairly quickly, because I don't get rid of a lot I haven't really been holding any of my younger self's books in my life. But at the same time, there's also a lot of short books that I've read that I've really loved. So it was a little hard picking one book for it. So I came up with 3, because if I'm anything, I'm overachieving. So the one book I have on my shelf would be The Awful Apple Orchard by, I'd actually look it up, M.D. Spencer, is part of the Shivers series. So Shivers is kind of like Goosebumps. It was this horror book series written for young adult, not young adult, middle grade kids, and it was all just about these spoopy tales. And I loved horror growing up. I read R.L. Stine fanatically, and Shivers is probably this is the only book I own in the series, but this is one of the more obscure horror books I own. That's for that age range. It's fairly short. It's only, let's see, 120 pages. That is pretty short for a book nowadays. Most books I read, most books that I've physically read lately have been 400, 700 pages, and that's a lot more book that I'm used to, because when I was a kid, books were maybe 400 tops, and that was excessive. But yeah, I definitely noticed the novels have gotten a lot longer lately, but I'm getting off point. What's Shivers about, Ryan? So pretty much you got 2 kids, just gonna look at the back cover, Daniel and Sarah without an H. They basically go on this leaf tour, somewhere in Maine or someplace East Coast that. And they stop by this and they go on vacation, and there's this apple orchard and this cidery? Whatever you call a place that makes apple cider. I don't know if there's a term for that. But pretty much there's this apple orchard, they make apple things, and they're in, just hanging around. But it's really, but basically a bunch of creepy stuff happens, and you're not ever really sure if the apple orchard is haunted. But pretty much it ends with them almost dying in this giant cider press, and it's just, oh, it's so zesty. And I just really loved it. It had this very macabre, Americana vibe to it. And I just love any horror novel, which is just tourist attraction, you mean death? That goes on my list. That is aesthetic. So I just really liked it. It was a really short book, but I loved reading it as a kid. And I actually haven't picked it up in a while. So This might be on a future, wrap up or something. Two of the books that I should just like gleefully mention that are not from when I was like 12 was a book I read all in one night was The Running Man, Richard Bachman, which, as you know, is a pseudonym for Stephen King. I like to separate the two because the writing styles are very different, and I feel like that pays respect to the fictionalized Richard Bachman, but whatever. Running Man is a lot different from the movie Arnold Schwarzenegger, though I still love the movie. And I managed to read that all in one night, when I was in high school, because I picked it up and I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is so good, and I just kept reading it. And like 5 hours later, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. Thank goodness it was a Friday, but I'm just like, oh, it was so good. And I was like exhausted, but I literally could not put the damn thing down because I'm just like, oh, it was zesty. Now, if you don't know what The Running Man is, let me tell you. It's pretty much a futuristic dystopian sci-fi novel where this man who is kind of poor but like intellectual gets basically drafted for this most dangerous game type show. So they made a movie adaptation, which is where it's like in their own like sort of like arena. But in the original, they basically say you have 24 hours like leeway. Go run out, go hide somewhere. We're going to like get these hunters to hunt you down, and this public manhunt that's just televised. And so it's literally this guy on this cat and mouse escape into the American dystopia and trying not to get hunted down for mass media entertainment. And it works really well as a dystopian novel. It has just I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. There's a lot of great dystopian novels there, 1984, stuff like that. And compared to those, it works really well in that same vein. It's very 80s dystopian. That's a good way to describe it. But at the same time, you just get this really fascinating character. It's just a really interesting way of describing it. And the ending is just top notch. I like the movie adaptation. It's fun. It has a good couple it's definitely takes some creative liberties, but it works as sort of the feel for the book. And I liked it anyways, but the original book is so much better in every single way. Another book to mention, and that's just because I literally finished this yesterday because I was sitting at my mom's house doing nothing, and so I had to do something, so I listened to an audiobook. And that was We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. You might have saw that on my Instagram. And oh my goodness, it was such a good book. So I haven't read too much of Shirley Jackson's work, but I just finished watching The Haunting of Hill House. And I wanted to get more into her writing. And so I popped that on. So pretty much We've Always Lived in the Castle is the story of this girl named Mary Cat who's 18, I believe, or somewhere around that age. And she basically lives with her sister Constance and her uncle Julian. And they basically just live by themselves after the entire family dies from arsenic poisoning, and it's this huge tragedy. And so it's just this little bit gothic, tale, and it deals with family and isolation and I guess ostracization of the town and all these other things. And so it's just a very intimate novel, and it's plays its horror aspect really well. I feel it's more macabre than a horror because it's not particularly scary, but there's these very intense, disturbing moments in it, I'd rather say. I liked it. It was fairly short. It was a short little novel, but it really worked, and it had just such a great style and voice to it, and you really sort of sympathize with the characters in the novel, even though they were very codependent and very eccentric. And it was a stylistic novel, and I loved it, and I really enjoy Shirley Jackson's work, because even though that one wasn't particularly scary, I know she does have some stuff that was super disturbing, her lottery short story. Love that. Moving on, Brian, because you're literally 10 minutes into this, and you're only on the first fucking prompt, but you know I've been laying in bed a lot, is snacking. I actually haven't been snacking too much, weirdly enough. I have eaten out a little bit, I'll go and have a bean burrito at Taco Bell, but I try not to snack, just, I don't know why, I don't. But it's, name a guilty pleasure reading. This was really hard for me to think of something, mostly just because I don't have a lot of guilty pleasures that I read. Either, most of the stuff I would think of that would be a guilty pleasure, I guess E.L. James or Twilight, stuff like that, which I would consider somebody's guilty reading. I'm not interested in that type of novel. I don't really read romance. I don't really read erotica, or at least not in book form, you know? So I didn't really have any, like, choice for that. So most of what I would consider guilty reading, I don't really have an interest in. But started thinking, like, you know, a little bit more abstractly, like, what would I be sort of embarrassed to read in public? Because that's what I kind of perceive guilty reading as. It's sort of like, I would be embarrassed to read this, but it's really good. And I finally settled on the Kitchen Princess series by Mayuko Kobayashi. It's a manga series, and she's the writer of it. There's a separate illustrator, and I don't remember her name, but I will try to, like, put it up there edit-wise because I don't want to disrespect. But what is Kitchen Princess about? It's the reason why I was a little embarrassed about this is that it's very shoujo, which is manga directed towards, I guess, women, or I guess like young adult females would be a better description. And so pretty much the whole thing about, like, you know, shoujo writing is that it's usually about some chick and she wants to, like, find her prince, like this super cool hot guy who, like, saved her life a while back and, like, you know, helped her, like, live her best life and achieve her dreams and give her goals and whatever. And it's kind of a common, and, like, it's a pretty common trope in shoujo, or at least the shoujo I've read. It's very, like, you know, it's pretty much what Fruit Baskets is about. Well, Fruit Baskets is also reverse harem, but let's move on. And so like, you know, it kind of, like, starts up in that vein. I don't remember the name of the main character, but pretty much she was an orphan. And one day she nearly drowns, and, like, this really chill guy, like, stops her from drowning. He's, like, the same age, so it's not weird or creepy. And he's like, oh, hey, you almost died. So, like, I'm glad I saved you. And she's just like, why didn't you let me die? I could have been with, like, my parents because I'm an orphan, and and I'm, like, a little bit, like, suicidal right now. And he's just like, wow, that's, like, really sad and fucked up, and you're going through a lot of shit. I can't fix that, but you look hungry, have some flan. And she's like, this is delicious. And she's like, starts thinking, like, you know, I'm having a lot of emotional moments, and, like, right now, I kind of want to be with, like, you know, not alive, because, like, my family's dead, and I'm going through all this grief. But at the same time, like, this is a really great experience, and I might, like, really love cooking. And so she's just, like, she kind of, like, finds, like, her second wind, and she, like, decides, hey, maybe life's worth living. And I don't want to make it feel like the entire thing is about, like, you know, her suddenly eating some flan and deciding not to have suicide ideation. It really isn't, like, you know, about that. And I definitely imply that, so, like, that may not be, like, the best description of her characterization, but pretty much in that moment, she was going through a lot of grief. She wanted to die because her parents were dead, and she didn't really see a future for herself. She was also, like, a really young child, I should mention at this point. So growing up, like, you know, she's made peace with the fact that her parents are, like, dead. And so she's found, like, you know, a new family with the orphanage and with, like, you know, her caretaker, and she's discovered a love for cooking. And so pretty much she decides, okay, I'm a bad bitch in the kitchen. I want to go to, like, this elite high school because I got good with my grades. And the reason why I'm doing this is because she had a spoon that, like, you know, she ate the flan with, and it was this insignia for, like, this elite academy of, like, bad bitches who do bad bitch things. And so she's like, well, I need to go be the baddest bitch at this elite academy, which I don't remember the name of, and I'm going to go do that. And so she gets there, and shit gets good. Like, pretty much she has these two love interests. One is a blonde, and he's, like, the classical, like, prince character, and he's just like, oh my goodness, hi, I'm, like, a knight in shining armor. Like, I'm also, like, a high-strung, like, you know, president's son, so, like, whatever. And then the other one is, like, the bad boy jock guy, who's also the first guy's brother and heir to, like, you know, the president's throne, the president of the college. And so she's basically, like, getting jiggy with, like, the two, like, most, I guess, powerful, like, characters in the fucking school. Also, in the first book, there's, like, the, like, jock character who's, like, a bit of a dick. He, like, just smashes, like, some flan on the ground, because, like, the chick was just like, boy, you want to get up and eat my flan? And he's just like, nah, bitch, and, like, smashes this teacup. She walks up, straight up, bitch slaps the dude. It's just like, bitch, you gotta eat that flan. We don't waste food in this house. And it's zesty. What I love about the series, so, like, there's that low romance aspect, and I'm just like, girl, you need to get yourself that man, like, you do it. But what I really love is just her love for cooking, the focus on food, because I never really had seen that much focus on, like, food in anime or manga, and it just really, like, made my it made me doki doki. It made my heart pulse. It was lovely. So there's this really great focus on food and like food culture and just the love of eating and taste and all of these different things. And I really love that because it's something I can appreciate as a cook and as a food lover. And it was really interesting because it showed me a different cuisine than my own, basically like, Japanese cuisine. And so it's kind of good to read it because, like, it's this fun, like, food romp, but at the same time, it's very, very sort of girly and shoujo, and it's basically just about this girl that, like, wants to get, like, this, like, guy. And so it's more romantic than the stuff I normally read. Though there's another shoujo series that I love, and it's called, Library Wars, and I'll have to talk about that in a later, video. So, you can tell which style I love that book series, and, so the next prompt is Netflix. Series that you want to start. So I've been like, browsing like, Goodreads and my Libby app, which I think is by Overdrive. I think that's what like the main thing is. And so like I've been like kind of like trying to suss out how like, familiarize myself with like sort of like the newer like books and the newer genres and stuff because I don't really read a lot of new releases and newer stuff. So like I want to be like, more well informed. So a series that's kind of like, been on my radar that I was like scoping along and I saw that I'm just like, ooh baby, like let me get at that, is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. And yes, I'm totally looking at my list while I say this. What is Truly Devious about? So I'm in the description and it's basically like this little sort of dark academia thing. And there's like this big ass, like, old Ivy college, and it's like full of like twisted pathways and ivy gardens and like statues that do things and like riddles and shit. And it's about like, and so it's this college from like this old guy who just like had all these like riddles and puzzles in school because like learning is a game or something, and like that sounded like super chill. Then on top of this like zesty like riddle fun time, true crime. Pretty much his wife and kid gets kidnapped. It's a little bit Lindbergh baby, if we're being honest from the description. And the only thing they find is like this creepy-ass Whittler-style riddle on the wall signed Truly Devious. And so I'm like, okay, like that's zesty backstory. Then we add another layer, right? And this chick comes to the college, don't remember her name. It might even be a girl, it might be a dude, who knows. And they're a true crime aficionado. And so they're like reading, and so they're just like, they're really interested in the case. And so they kind of like want to know what's happening with this true crime thing while also dealing with this sort of like, college drama, like, dark academia thing. And so it's just like 12 times of aesthetic, and it looks so good because I love true crime. I love mysteries. I really love I'm not into like dark academia as an aesthetic, but I like the sort of denotation, sorry, not the connotations of the aesthetic and like sort of like the different like motifs of it, because I think that can be like really fun, and I'm I like to really trying to think of what I'm trying to say. I like a lot of the aspects of that, so like it looks like a really fun book series, and I want to get into it. So next up is Deep Clean. I have not been cleaning too much. I've been a little sad bitch about it, but I've been meaning to, And that is choose a book that's been on your TBR for like ages. So I don't really have that like expansive of a TBR. Either I have books and I've read them and that's why they're on my shelf, or I'll get books in the library and I'll read them and I'll love them, but then I'll have to like return them. So I don't really buy that many books I'm not sure that I want to read. I'll usually buy books that I've read and that I want to own, or they're part of a series that I love and I want to get the next one of. Or thirdly, they're just like a classic that I've heard of and I want to get it from my collection. Because I collect a lot of classics because I recognize the names. And I want to like read classics or something. I don't know. Pretty much, so it was a little hard to pick, but then I'm thinking like, what's a book I've been trying to finish for like ever? And it's been on my read shelf and I haven't been reading it because I've been a little bitch. And that is actually a book that I've made decent headway of during the quarantine, but I'm still not reading all the way through. And that is Will Write for Food by Diane Jacobs. Sorry, Jacob, not Jacobs. So what is it about, Ryan? Will Write for Food is basically this, I'm not going to say textbook, but I guess primer for food writing. The byline is The Complete Guide to Writing Cookbooks, Blogs, Reviews, Memoir, and More. And pretty much Diane Jacobs spoke with like 50,000 food writers and cookbook writers and like bloggers and journalists and all these different people. And she pretty much made a like really, really great way of discussing food writing and what all of like the industry things you need to do and all the stuff you need to know and all of that. And so I've been reading a lot because I am interested in food writing. I'm interested in like growing both as a cook and as like, just a writer in general. This has been like, a really great way of me sort of like, learning more about the craft and kind of getting insight into the industry. So it's also, because it's nonfiction, because it can be very technical, it is very thick and it does take me a long time to get through it. So I think I'm about, 118 is about, because I've been annotating this so I can actually see like on what page I'm at. So I'm about 100 pages in out of around 300, so I'm about a third of the way through. And I've been trying to read this since I bought this almost 2 years ago. Basically, I got this book in a fire sale at my college. They were looking through a bunch of their old textbooks that they didn't use. They used to have this book for a food writers class, along with, I think, salt, fat, acid, heat. And so I bought this along with a, I believe it was a Bourdain memoir, but it might have been a different cook's memoir. Yeah, it was either Bourdain or Jacques Pepin. I cannot remember. But pretty much it was one of the books that they used to have for a textbook. I bought it because it looked interesting. I wanted to expand all of my skills because I want to be a very well-rounded chef in all the different disciplines. And so I basically bought it for self-improvement. And I love it. I really love the book. I think it's great. One of these days I'm actually going to finish it, and this is going to be on my shelves as a reference forever. But I still have not gotten through this thing, and I bought this 2 years ago, and I keep trying to read it, and I never finish it. So, there we go. Deep Clean. I'm going to get to this book eventually. I have been reading it this quarantine. Next up, Animal Crossing. Book that you've recently bought because of the hype. So, I don't buy books because of hype. I really don't. I'm the type of bitch that's oh, something's hyped. Okay. And I'm trying to think of I never get onto hype trains. And sometimes I feel bad because I feel like I'm missing, I do feel a little bit of FOMO. I do feel a little bit like I'm missing out on the zeitgeist. And I definitely think it's important to review, and as a media reviewer on my blog, I guess now with the books that I'm trying to do, I feel like it's important to understand what the modern audience is into. But at the same time, it's just something super hyped, and I'm just that looks good, but I don't feel like participating in the conversation sometimes. And so I really will usually not listen to hype or anything unless it's from somebody I respect and they say it's really good. And then I'm just okay, I guess I gotta try it out, right? That being said, I finally caved in and I heard so much word of press. I heard it was the best thing ever. And I'm I gotta get it. And I was actually really surprised when I was talking to my friends about this book because pretty much the circles I was on the internet, the places that I talked about, this book was very well known. It was very well loved. It was very super hyped. And it was a little bit underground, but it was a very well-known underground type book. And so when I started talking to my friends and my librarians about it, pretty much the only people that had heard about that, it was the people at the bookstore and my college librarian. And all of my friends and associates had never heard of the book before. And I was really surprised. And so it was weird because it was hyped, but at the same time it was not hyped. And so pretty much I'm going to shut up. I'm going to stop teasing you about it. What is it? It's House of Leaves. What, Ryan? What's House of Leaves about? What is House of Leaves not about? But no. It's taken me weeks and months and I guess over a year to kind of define the elevator pitch for this book. Basically, imagine that Lemony Snicket was describing the Blair Witch Project to you, frame by frame. In that sort of self-referential, fourth wall breaking, very humorous storyline. But it's the Blair Witch Project, so it's creepy and edgy and already very self-referential at the same time. And you're okay, this is really interesting, you're liking this. Then, you notice in the margin notes of this book, somebody's been writing shit, and you're well, great, now I have to read more shit, somebody defaced this book. And so you look at what somebody wrote. And all of a sudden, instead of reading the Blair Witch Project told to you by Lemony Snicket, you're reading Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And you're like, okay, this is interesting, but then the two stories sort of connect together. And you're like, what? This is crazy. This is weird. And that is pretty much the best way I can describe it aesthetically. Now, what is it described like narratively, Ryan? Well, that's a bit different. Pretty much, I'm trying to think of the best. I'm looking for some zesty shit to show you on these pages, but I'm also trying to think of a good way of defining it narratively. Essentially, the main bulk of the story is what's called the Navidson Report, which is this fictional story, in-universe fictional story, about this documentary. And so this is where it gets a little bit meta. You start off with this introduction which describes this character named John Truman, I believe. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and I'm looking to see if it describes it. And it does not. Okay. So I have familiarized myself with some of the characters. Basically, you begin with an introduction by a character named Johnny Truant, who is this tattooist assistant, final word to say twice, who lives in LA. He does a bunch of drugs. He doesn't have a love life, and he's sad because his dad dead and his mother is in a mental institute. But you get to hear about that later. And he used to talk to this old guy whose name was Zampano, who was this blind novelist. He had what was it called, bibliomania, where he basically could not stop writing. And so he was just was a friend with him until one day the guy died really gruesomely or something, and no one really knows what happened. And so in the guy's apartment he finds this manual, this manuscript, and it's full of this it is long and it's jaunting, and some pieces are written on napkins or envelopes, and so it's not really all cut and dried and pieced together. And so he collects as much as he can of this manual as he is cleaning out this guy's apartment, and he starts reading it. And so one half of the actual manuscript you're reading, and it has all these side notes, and it's weird and rambling and meta, and it has all of these different aspects to it. But at the same time, you're also reading Johnny Truant's story as he's reading the novel, and sort of getting this massive paranoia about it. And so there's a lot of really interesting pieces to it. One thing that is kind of unique is its use, besides multiple narrators and fonts for each narrator, is its level of footnotes. So throughout the Navidson Report, the actual manuscript, you will have footnotes for hundreds of different articles that are completely fictionalized. The Navidson Report is about this documentary of this guy finding a hole, this basically labyrinth in his house that should not exist and doesn't exist in sort of our perception. And so that's what the documentary is about, and all of them sort of piecing it together. But the entire thing is fictionalized. But the way that the manuscript writer Zampano writes it is that it's supposedly this big cultural phenomenon that hundreds of people have seen, and he has all of these quotes from celebrities who've seen it, and these journalists who've written about it in all of these different books. And so it's weird because at the same time he acts like it exists, but it doesn't in the slightest. And so it's this very strange meta narrative that is just absolutely crazy. And it just gets crazier and crazier as you read into the book and get just more familiarized with what was his name, Jansky's writing style. And it's an experience and a trip. I'll show you a little bit of what I'm talking about. This is a legitimate page in the book. And this is kind of just the most subtle of some of the writing things. There is literally entire blank pages. There's pages with just really strange formatting like this. And you have to get really invest in how the story actually works and all of that. One thing I thought was cool about the creation of this book was that Danielewski, I don't know how to pronounce his name, actually went down to the publishers and actually type-fitted the manuscript for this book himself. So he actually went in and he made all of the pages like this and all the other things, and it took him who knows how long. Like, it is just a crazy freaking book. Another cool thing about this copy, I actually got the remastered full color edition, which has all of the colored text in it, as well as a bunch of... So it has the colored text, it has the novella that came after this, the roll still letters, and it also has some collage and full color photos from the book. And so the appendixes actually tie into, like, you know, the story itself, and are actually referenced at different points, and so... This book is just, like, fucking crazy, and it's also amazing, and I love it. And it is so worth the hype. It's one of those strange, like, meta novels that completely just, like, blow your mind. And so I just really love it because it's just, there's so many things in this book that you have never seen in, like, literature or novels, and it's basically like the E. Cummings of prose. Best way to describe it, E. Cummings of prose. I've been talking about, House of Leaves for like way too long, so let's move on because we're going to be here forever. And that's next up is Next Prompt, Productivity. Name a book that you've learned from or has had an impact on your life. I was having a little hard time thinking about this, but then I'm thinking, like, you know, what book has been, like, really inspiring for me? What has, like, sort of, like, you know, something that actually makes me want to go out and do shit and live my best life. And so, it's one I've been actually listening to. I was just listening to it earlier today, before I started, like, you know, prepping for this video. And that was My Life in France by Julia Child and Alex Prudhomme. He helped her write it. And so it's essentially a biography. It's one of the last books she wrote, I believe, before she passed away, of her life, beginning in France and then, like, sort of, like, you know, on towards just the beginning of her career as a gastronome and as a cook. And it is just fantastic. It basically starts with, like, you know, her coming to France, really falling in love with the cuisine and the country and the culture, and learning how to cook because she had, like, you know, not cooked very much in, like, her earlier life. And she discovered her love for it later on. And it's absolutely fantastic. You've heard me talking about these on my vlogs, like, you know, earlier when I, like, first started. And I really, really love the book. It definitely has given me a lot of inspiration for, like, you know, the kitchen and my food writing and my cooking in general. And I can really appreciate Julia Child's just verve and vigor for the art, for the craft. And it really is something that I can sympathize and empathize a lot to with my own, like, you know, love of cooking and my journey as a cook. And so it's just fantastic. I really appreciate just all of her insights and all of her thoughts on food, and really how she has this deep love for, like, culture and for community and all these other things throughout the book. It's also really interesting because Julia Child has been, like, always an inspiration for me, like, when I was younger and I wanted to become a cook, and I didn't really know how to get into, like, you know, the industry. And so she was one of the celebrities that, like, you know, I thought, hey, she's really awesome. Ever since I saw her make creme brulee with a blowtorch, I'm just like, that's fucking bitching. I want to do that, and I have done that, so go me. And, yeah, but, like, it basically talked about a lot of portions of her life that I had known about, but had not really known a lot about. And so that was really cool. It talked about her coming to France, about her learning the cuisine, about basically her her basically getting educated at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, and also starting this Tres Gourmands, the Three Happy Eaters, which was this cooking school that she founded with two of her friends in Paris, where they basically taught housewives how to cook, what did she call it? La cuisine bourgeoise. Basically, like, this fanciful cooking that was like, nice and stuff. And that's just my cousin in the background, so sorry about that if it's a little distracting. He seems to be having fun, though. He's having pot roast. And so, like, you know, it moves on to her, like, you know, starting to write, Mastering the Art of French Cooking, which was this really big novel that she co-wrote with another one of her friends who I cannot remember off the top of my head, and I feel like I'm giving her a really big disservice for that, so I will put her name up there. And Julia Child talks about, like, you know, her writing the novel, writing the sequel to it, her beginning, like, you know, her introduction into television and starting the French Cook. And so it's a really great autobiography that I'm really glad to have read, because it's fantastic. It's probably, like, one of my favorite, like, you know, celebrity chefs that I've heard of, always been an inspiration for me. And actually, like, reading her style and her wit and, like, sort of her voice has just really been a great, like, inspiration to me, like, now, like, right now. It's like, I'm listening to this and I'm just like, why am I not in the kitchen? Why am I clipping blackberry vines? I got shit to do and things to make and, like, skills to refine. And it was great, and I loved it. So, Really happy to be reading that. I'm going to talk about that more in my wrap-up, but let's move on. Facetime. Let's see, so it's to pick a book that you have been gifted. I don't get a lot of gifts for books, which is weird because I feel like I've maintained the fact that I am a reader throughout my life, but I don't really that many books as gifts. I guess people don't really know what sort of books I want, or I don't have a lot of bookish friends that like to read, so they wouldn't know what my reading taste is. But yeah, I haven't received that many book gifts. Sounds weird. That being said, my mom did sort of like loan gave me a book earlier this week, and I finished it, and I liked it. So I'm just going to choose that one, because it's easy peasy, bitch. So I just finished this book that my mom gave me. She originally found it on a sort of like giveaway table at her apartment building, and then she like basically DTF'd it early in. I started reading it to her while I was staying there for a couple of days to help her out, and then I just took it home with me when I like went back to my house. And that is Dan Abnett's Embedded. And I'm like, okay, this is zesty. Like, what's it about? First saw it, I'm thinking like, okay, it's like war fiction. I'm not that into war fiction though. I think I've said before, like there are a few like novels I've really loved that are war fiction. But it's like it looked okay, but like I'll give it a chance. I ain't got much to do here, so I started reading. And it turns out that, like, it is, like, war fiction. It does involve, like, people, like, in a war zone, like, doing, like, having firefights. But it's also this really interesting, like, deep space colony, hard sci-fi novel. And so, pretty much, Abnett wrote a story where pretty much the Cold War was still a thing. You had the socialist bloc, you had the United States, but they had moved their expansion out into the stars. And so they are currently on planet 86, so the 86th planet that has been colonized. And so it's really sort of the beginning heyday of the planet. It doesn't really have a name yet. It's still just a number. But it has a few colonies. It has a few metropolitan cities. And there's this sort of like conflict that's brewing between the two things, but nobody knows what's happening. There's like a lockdown and all of that. And so we follow Falk, I believe his name is, and he is this intrepid veteran journalist. He has done all this cool shit. He's well respected. And so he is like, well known in his circles. And he wants to get the scoop on the shit, right? And basically what happens is he basically uses this experimental technology, kind of a reverse Total Recall, where he basically gets shunted, has a little mind meld thing with a soldier in the conflict. And so he is, and this is a little bit spoiler, sorry, but I think nowhere listed on the back cover, so it's not spoilers. And so pretty much he's like, hanging out with like, this soldier. He's kind of getting used to like, not being able to control his body and like having other people's sensations and memories and thoughts in his head. And that looked to be having a lot of fun. Anyway. But pretty much like, he's like, dealing like with a soldier in this war zone. And then all shit breaks loose. And so pretty much what happens is the soldier kind of brain dies, and like he's alive, but he's not really there. And so while like, his soldier, like, the soldier, like the main personality is like underneath, like, is just like sleeping off like this gunshot to the head, Falk has to be this soldier in this war zone trying to figure out like, what's happening while also watching all of his like, I guess, troop mates die horribly. And so while it's like, hard sci-fi and it has like all this intrigue and all of like, this world building plot, it also has a bunch of stuff that like deals with like, the actual like, trials of war and all of this bullshit. And so it is just, it's crazy because you're like dealing with a sci-fi setting and then you get straight up dropped into a war zone and you're like, what the fuck? And it's zesty. And I like the world building in it. I like the characters in it. I like the writing style in it. It was really good. It wasn't like, the best book I've ever written. I'm going to give this 4 out of 5 stars if I'm being honest, but I liked it. I'm just going to check out Abnett next time I see him in, like, the store, but this is actually a really cool gift that I got. Moving on, because this is not a wrap-up video, this is a book tag. We're moving on to, okay, last one. Actually, 2 more, but basically, like, the last regular set, and that's self-care. What has been something you've been doing to, like, take care of yourself, like an adult? And I'm like, I've been drinking water, so I've been doing that. But I think the main thing is really I have been trying to take care of my hygiene. whenever I have this sort of summer thing where I don't have too much free time, it's a really bad issue of mine. And so I've been trying to clip my nails, I've been trying to shave my beard, I've been trying to shower regularly. One of the things that's been helping me do that is I've been out in the yard. I've been trying to, do work on the yard work, and that's been giving me some structure, some actual physicality that is keeping me going and really allowing me to structure my free time better. Because that's the issue. Like, when I have actual shit to do, when I have goals and stuff, I'm a well-oiled machine. But when I have too much free time, I just lange about because I feel like I have too much time. I don't know how to describe it. But basically, just taking care of my hygiene, working in the yard, that type of stuff has been really helping me, take care of myself during, this period. And, bonus is, name, a book that you've been excited for that's coming out soon. Like I said, I've been trying to familiarize myself with just all of, these new books coming out, and it's, super crazy and shit. But one book that I was reading, reading the synopsis of, and I'm just ooh, that is zesty, was, I'll make sure I read that correctly. The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Never heard of the author before. Don't know if he's debut. Maybe he's super just entrenched in the genre, and I had no fucking idea because I'm a piece of shit. But it looked so zesty. What I read from the synopsis was it's 4 old childhood friends. They're all Native American, or I believe they said American Indian. I don't remember exactly, but they're all Native American. And they were being chased by this entity. That's what the phrase they use, from their past. So it sounded a little bit like a supernatural horror, which is exactly my shit. It has, this, it's from a Native American, setting, which I think is really interesting. So my hope is that it's, this sort of supernatural horror set from, Native American folklore and culture. If that's what the book's about, because I think that's what it is, but it's a little vaguely written in the synopsis, that sounds super fucking bitching. That sounds exactly my aesthetic, and I want to read it. I love folklore, I love supernatural horror, and I think that Native American culture is really fascinating. And so if there's, all 3 of those, in that book, I want to read it. I want to find out what it's about. I want it to become my biggest, favoriteest, newest thing. So, that was me, that's all the questions. So, that was me attempting the Stay-at-Home book tag. I know it's, a month late, but whenever I ever been on time for anything, except for, my actual social obligations that aren't, on YouTube. But I had a lot of fun with that. I really liked Paperbacks in Paradise's, original video. I had a lot of fun, sort of recreating the book tag. And I don't feel like I did it enough justice, but I tried my best. So, whatever. Let me know if you like the books that I've mentioned, or if you have, any books that you think I should read. I'll put the questions down below. You can, I'll tag you guys if you want to, though. Or if you, don't have a YouTube channel, just, tell me your, book prompts down below. And, yeah. Sorry, guys. I am not the best video-wise, but I'm trying my best. I'm doing what I can, and I just had fun with it. So, guys, that's going to be me, shutting up for right now. I do have to, figure out the rest of the week for vlogging, because I have not been getting on that. And I just have a lot of shit to do today. I always say that, but it's true. I'm going to give you, a few, just, life updates while we're here, sort of the outro. One really cool thing that happened was we received another box in the Nailbrook ARG, and so we're pondering over that shit. You guys should check out the subreddit, which, a lot of, I believe that community member VC posts on that. So if you're interested in the ARG, check that out, because it's, so cool, and we're pondering over what all that means. So I'm going to be updating the wiki, later on today with all the new stuff. Other than that, I've been doing some reading, I've been trying to do some yard work, and nothing really new happens in that department. I just wanted to mention the ARG stuff because we're excited, and it's been kind of dead lately because of the virus, so yay. Anyway, guys, I'm completely spun out. I'm gonna shut up now. So this is False Bulls 123, and I'm signing off.